What is up, YouTube? Jason here. Today I'm taking a break from Crime and Punishment, and we will be taking a look at a poem by Theodore Roethke, My Papa's Waltz. I'm going to get into some just basic information about the poem, some biographical information about Roethke, and then we'll break off into an analysis. So, but first let me recite it to you, okay? Just to begin. So, the whiskey on your breath could make a small boy dizzy, but I hung on like death. Such waltzing was not easy. We romped until the pan slid from the kitchen shelf. My mother's countenance could not unfrown itself. The hand that held my wrist was battered on one knuckle. Every step you missed, my right ear scraped a buckle. You beat time on my head with a palm caked hard by dirt, then waltzed me off to bed, still clinging to your shirt, okay? All right. Um, so, originally published in 1942 in the Hearst magazine, and then later appeared in Rothke's collection, The Lost Son and Other Poems, in 1948. Rothke is a descendant, well, his family, his extended family, I guess, but his family, well, really his immediate family, his grandfather emigrated from Germany to the U.S. So Rothke's something of German descent. And that's important to keep in mind when thinking about the title of the poem, My Papa's Waltz, okay? Waltz is a German, it originated from Germany and Austria, I believe in the late 18th, 19th century, and it translates to Waltz, or yeah, that's the German word for it, Waltz, which means to roll or to revolve. Okay, and that will come up later. But they kept greenhouses. The Rothke family, his father and grandfather, both kept greenhouses, and he was from Saginaw, Michigan. Okay, so you have this contrast between the life, and it's said in my anthology, in the biography of Rothke, or Rothke's biography, that this was like a particularly, you couldn't ask for a better place for a poet to have an upbringing. It, it void or it schooled the spirit in such a way. I guess you have the contrast between life and the renewal life present in the greenhouses, and then the desolate, somewhat barren landscape in where he was from in Michigan. And this is a quote pertaining to that, right? The marsh, the mire, the void. I think this is Rothke's own writing. The marsh, the mire, the void is always there, immediate and terrifying. It is a splendid place for schooling the spirit. It is America. And whatever he means by that last sentence, it is America. You can certainly think of the void as, representing or being a metaphor for America, right? Hunter Thompson in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and touching on the American dream. And perhaps other contemporaries, although of Rothke, but T.S. Eliot may have came before Rothke. The wasteland, right, and sort of the decay, and the abandoning of morals, and the decay of contemporary America. And of course, T.S. Eliot moves to Europe to try to get away, I guess. But the marsh, the mire, the void is always there, immediate and terrifying. It is a splendid place for schooling the spirit. So what does that tell us about schooling of the artistic mind, and what is, a good curriculum for this, or a good place to school the spirit? Somewhere that invokes a bit of fear. but I guess also that you have a place where you also have contrast. And I think viewing the renewal of life up close for Rothke was probably something also contrasted by the barren landscape in Saginaw, Michigan. Uh, it's yeah, it schooled the spirit in such a way that you have the renewal of life contrasted by the by seemingly death or inhospitable barren landscape. And yes, just I think the contrast is where the poet perhaps thrives, and also just viewing life up close in the greenhouses also is perhaps something he was able to take with him when writing his poetry, because I think in his early days, his early like poetic career, that's what constituted his early writing days, was green poems about the greenhouse, and the greenhouse poetry, I guess. It's the greenhouses provided Rothke with order and structure, and this was also something representative of his German heritage, right? A sort of terrifying efficiency and a little too orderly, but nonetheless, yes, produced or served as like certainly a well of inspiration for Rothke. Rothke went on to teach at the University of Washington, and he served as a mentor, a teacher for some prominent names, including James Wright, David Wagner, and Richard Hugo. Um, you know, his advice, though, which was a bit contradictory of his own like poetic style, his advice to beginning poets, right, amateur poets, was to he was against undisciplined self-expression, and he his advice was to write like somebody else, right? Even though his work was highly personal. Yeah, so. But then there's mention of he had an apprenticeship with Yeats, I guess W.B. Yeats. And you see this having, it sort of muddies his voice and compromises his deeply personal vision that shaped his earlier works. And at least some critics say, or allude to, his apprenticeship with Yeats doing this, having perhaps like a negative impact on his personal voice, because how do you live up to somebody like W.B. Yeats? I mean, Yeats has his own writing style, his own philosophy even, and of course you can use this as inspiration, but to fully assume this as your guide when writing poetry, your voice is going to begin to sound muddied, and you may lose yourself, and you're not, elevating Yeats or bringing Yeats to the forefront, but you're just, maybe you are, but you're losing yourself in that, I guess. Towards the latter part of his career, that's when Rothke began to see recognition. He won a Pulitzer Prize for The Waking in 1953, National Book Award and Bollingen Prize for the collected poems Words for the Wind in 1958, and a posthumous National Book Award for The Far Field in 1964. Okay, so now I'll just touch on some characteristics of the poem itself, right? So it's written in iambic trimeter. You have three iambs, which iamb means unstressed / stressed, in referring to the syllables. And an ABAB rhyme scheme containing some slant rhymes. So, in the first stanza, dizzy and easy, like the whiskey on your breath could make a small boy dizzy, but I clung on like death. Such waltzing was not easy. So dizzy and easy, but in the the way you enunciate these words, you can sort of force a rhyme, I guess, or otherwise, like you have a slant rhyme. So they don't necessarily match up perfectly, but you can still forge a rhyme out of them. And you see people like, Eminem doing shit like this all the time, or at least, back when he was making, people were paying attention to him, and he was actually capturing lightning in a bottle and making great rap music. But everybody has their time and place, including Roethke, I guess. So the themes present in the poem, you have the contradictory nature of father-son relationships, such as like loving your father, but also fearing your father. So there's a bit of a paradox there. Childhood memory, as I said, love and fear, domestic violence and abuse, and drunkenness. And the way domestic violence sort of coincides with drunkenness, and the two build off one another. And perhaps, they certainly influence one another and make one another stronger. Because you can certainly make an argument that this poem, there's a subtext about domestic violence, or a subtext about abuse, if not just outrightly stated outright. So now, yes, I'll get into my analysis of the poem. So with every stanza, you have the father's character being rendered all the more visible. Like I said, from stanza to stanza, the father's character is rendered sort of a bit more visible than the previous stanza. So you have a picture slowly coming to life. Each line, as I already said, reveals more about his personality, his role in the home, and Roethke's relationship with his dad. Viewing the waltz is like watching an artist paint in real time. Every brushstroke, every splash of color added to the canvas unveils a series of snapshots taken from the overarching concept that serves as the source of inspiration for the painter. To ascertain intent, and I want us to focus in on what I'm saying here, okay? To understand, to ascertain intent, is to get a peek behind the curtain and see all variables responsible for bringing a performance to life. And when we perform a literary analysis, it depends, okay? Sometimes you can look at it in different ways. You can totally disregard author's intent, because often you can come at it from the standpoint that author's intent is completely irrelevant. It's how we make meaning out of the text and then go from there. Because unless the author explicitly states his or her intent, then we'll really never know. And, since, like I said, we are the ones that make the text give meaning to it through our reading and our interpreting of it, because where would a text be without it? That's why you have pieces that praise the reader, or give place the responsibility on the reader, and the meaning, and give more credit to the reader. I forget the author, the theorist who primarily focused on that. Perhaps the death of the author. I've mentioned it before. So yes, to stare nuance in the face, understanding that you'll never understand how features arose from such a plight until conversation, active empathy, and trust erect a bridge, allowing you to access their life's journey. Now, obviously, we can't do this with the author, I guess. But I think this is more broadly speaking beyond literature. Um, when trying to understand another person you're conversating with, you'll never quite understand the nuance that constructs them or that goes into making them and unique until you actually converse and you have active empathy and trust, and really all relationships are obviously built on trust. And then that trust is going to construct a bridge where you may cross and begin to see glimpses into their life's journey. Um, I don't. I'm just saying to if we want to stare nuance in the face, especially in relation to the poem, then I think we have to try to understand and try to empathize with Rothke's position a bit. You can just interpret it for what it is and for what the words, their literal meaning. Um, but yeah, they're the lexicon meaning. I was trying to think of that word. So um, okay. Anyway, but I think for this poem, just given the message, um, to ascertain intent, and the intent is why a waltz, I guess, like the intent of choosing a waltz to talk about, to describe this dance that's occurring between him and his father. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying why, what is actually going on. Like, we can ruminate all day and come up with and theorize all day uh, and ask questions, but we may never know unless Rocky flat out tells us. But that's somewhat neither here nor there. Um, Rather, just going through the process of it is really the important part. Regardless of what, if you come up with a earth-shattering conclusion that no one's ever thought of, and yada, 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 and it brings about some buzz, then great. But if you're left alone with your conclusion and it really goes nowhere, but at least it forced you to sort of think outside and shift perspectives and think outside of yourself for a moment and, contemplate what somebody else is perhaps going through. Okay, so I digressed and went on sort of a tirade, but let me reel it back. So why a waltz? That's, like I said, that's what that sort of, to ascertain intent is to get a peek behind the curtain. That's what I'm saying. The intent of choosing a waltz. Why not a tango or a ballet, or a ballet, or some interpretive style of dance? Why a dance at all? Why not my papa's lullaby, my papa's whiskey-fueled tomfoolery, babysat by a bottle of whiskey as alternative titles? Why the title My Papa's Waltz? I think the reason for this is there are parallels between the contents of the poem and the waltz itself. As I mentioned, the waltz originated in Austria and, you guessed it, like I said, Germany during the 18th century. And Rothke's family, extended family, emigrated from Germany to the U.S. So you have a parallel there. Maybe this is like an homage to his lineage and his family's history. The waltz, it is performed in triple meter. Triple meter is characterized by a primary division of 3 beats to the bar. As mentioned, Rothke's poem is written in iambic trimeter, which is a rhythmic meter consisting of 3 iambs, so another parallel. When a couple is engaged in a waltz, they are linked close together. This may allude to Rothke's close proximity to his father while dancing and horseplaying. If we look at the opening lines of the poem, this becomes evident. Roethke is close enough to smell whiskey emanating from his dad's breath. Perhaps in a desire to be like his father, Roethke imagines himself getting tipsy from the, whiskey fumes swirling in the air, a type of intoxication by association. And if we look at the German translation, as I already mentioned, like if we, bring this back up into the foreground of Waltz, translated in German, Waltz, and its meaning, to roll or revolve. This may be suggestive of the circular motion, the dance between Roethke and his papa follows, and or the reoccurrence of the dance and whatever the waltz entails, or maybe a metaphor for, whether it's meant to signify drunken horseplay, abuse, or a combination of the two. So, yes, I think in choosing a waltz, you have like paying homage to his German ancestry. Okay, you also have somebody, the man, who usually leads and the woman who follows. But obviously his papa would be leading and Roethke would be following. You also have the parallel between the meter of the dance, the rhythm of the dance, and the rhythm of the poem. And the close proximity. It's the waltz carefully choreographed. You're in close. Missing a step may mean, may spell catastrophe for the whole dance. So I think that's sort of why we have a waltz. Something I wanted to touch on, in the first stanza he says, "But I hung on like death, such waltzing was not easy." Why isn't Roethke hanging on for dear life? Why is it death? Why is he hanging on like death? Well, there's a certain finality about death, fear of death. He also may being cheeky. Roethke may being cheeky and turning this this figure of speech on its head. Because also like hanging on for death, hanging on for dear life, means you get to live afterwards, if you manage to hang on. But in him hanging on like death, perhaps if he misses a step, that means he's beaten into oblivion, and it's almost like a type of death. But also, like I said, the finality, and there's a certain fear there in this dance, in undergoing this dance with his papa. And sort of shrouded throughout the whole poem, you have sort of nostalgia. And is he conflating like abuse with like sort of happy, joyous memories? And it's also interesting how, like, if abuse constitutes your childhood, what does this do for our understanding of good and evil, or like happy and sad? Do you end up taking pleasure in negative emotion, right? Or bad times? Do you look fondly upon them? Yeah, and such waltzing was not easy. There's like stress in just ensuring that every step he takes, like if we imagine his feet on top of his father's and trying to follow his father's footsteps, his drunken footsteps, it's quite the task for a 10-year-old boy, however he was, whatever age we imagine him at. And then what is the mother doing during all this? Well, their drunken dance, horseplay, or, it's causing a bit of chaos and mischief. Pans are sliding from the kitchen shelf, and my mother's countenance could not unfrown itself. So the mother is sort of standing back, arms crossed, incredulous, just frowning, pissed off, right? She just got done doing the dishes, and she'll be damned if her father is going to come home after drinking, all day and just with the, flick of the wrist or like a drunken misstep start breaking dishes. But, dare not say anything because he'd probably backhand the shit out of her. I mean, maybe not, right? But I think this next stanza may actually prove otherwise, because he says, "The hand that held my wrist was battered on one knuckle. Every step you missed, my right ear scraped a buckle." So the hand that held my wrist was battered on one knuckle. So why is his knuckles battered? Is this like a metaphor for abuse? Does this allude? Is this suggestive of abuse? Like, has he been beating his wife and possibly his children? Roethke's dad. Sorry. And also, like, at every step you missed, my right ear scraped a buckle. Every step you miss. You imagine a drunk person, sometimes maybe they smack you on the back, and they're doing it playfully, but they smack you a little too hard. They're sort of unaware of not just their strength, but just of their movements. Also, they lose control over their motor functions. So, they're not recognizing that they may be causing pain for people, and that certainly happens all the time. Yes, you're foregoing anxiety by drinking, and perhaps you're shutting off your cognitive function, and meaning you don't have to deal with certain stressors of life, but that means everybody else has to deal with you now. So that's sort of an unfortunate reality of alcoholism. So yes, and then the final stanza. You beat time on my head with a palm caked hard by dirt, then waltzed me off to bed, still clinging to your shirt. You beat time on my head. What does this mean? With a palm caked hard by dirt. So certainly his palms are caked hard by dirt, working in the greenhouse, in whatever work he, was a part of. So you have an industrious, perhaps a hardworking man, even though he drinks. And then you beat time on my head. And also a man's man, right? Very masculine. He taught Roethke how to be a man, how to be a man's man. But also he was forced to mature faster. I think that's what that means. You beat time on my head. Your drunkenness, your absent, you being absent from the home. Also, not just physically, even if you were there physically, but emotionally. You weren't always present, and I was forced to mature faster. I was forced to be there for Mom when you weren't. And then waltzed me off to bed, still clinging to your shirt. And then finally, this is his lullaby every night, a drunken dance with his father. So of course, even though there may be signs of abuse intertwined with this poem, you also have it being fused with sort of looking back at these childhood memories with a certain nostalgia. So it's interesting how you have the contradictory nature of love and fear, and abuse and joyous childhood memories, and the conflating between the two. It's all happening in this poem. And like I said, I think we need to look at the reason for selecting My Papa's Waltz as a title and not something else. Because I think, yeah, you have, it's ultimately like this horseplay. It's considered a dance. It's reoccurring, right? Of waltza, meaning to roll or to revolve. This dance, this is his lullaby, night after night. And of course, there are probably nights where it's, maybe the abuse is harsher than others, but then there are nights where, his father is the father he knows and loves. Yeah, but it's also up to you to make meaning out of the text. So, yeah, that's been me looking at Roethke's My Papa's Waltz, and yeah, thanks for watching. I'll be back with more Crime and Punishment at some point in the future. So, yeah, thank you guys.